Hi everyone, my name's Carl and welcome to another edition of Aylesbury Answers. This is number 5 and we start with an interesting question which has led me down a rabbit hole. Done a bit of digging on this one. From Oliver John Kent, who asks, I believe executions used to take place on the balcony of Crown Court buildings with viewings from the Green Man. Is there any documented history of public executions in Aylesbury and outside the town at World's End? Well, I'm not sure about World's End because that's a bit out of my area of interest. But yes, there were many executions held in Market Square. In about 1809, something called the New Drop was erected on the front of the County Hall. The balcony, which you can see illustrated here, in this drawing of 1845, shows the balcony on the County Hall, and there used to be a trapdoor in the middle of it, and a contraption was wheeled out. I think it was wheeled out. This huge metal contraption which enabled the hanging to take place. Yeah, very horrible scene it must have been, but it drew crowds for some reason. I've done a lot of investigation into how hangings were carried out before that. So I've looked back in old newspapers and I found this entry from the Gloucester Journal on the 1st of April 1735. And it says here, on Thursday last, Philip Thomas condemned the last assizes at Aylesbury in Bucks for horse stealing. Sent to the under-sheriff of the county and begged very hard that he might not be carried to the place of execution in a cart, he choosing either to go on horseback or walk on foot. The sheriff said he might go which way he would, provided he was secured, and accordingly on Friday last about 12 o'clock he was conveyed to the gallows on horseback, dressed in his shroud with a pair of white gloves on, a crape hatband tied with a white favour, a nosegay in one hand and a book in the other, where he was executed. He seemed to die very hardened and resolute. He was buried on Sunday night last in Aylesbury churchyard, being carried to the grave by 6 young men, and his pulse supported by 6 young women dressed in white, chose out by him for that purpose. So, where was the gallows on horseback? It was actually down Bicester Road, and I've done some investigation here because I've always believed, because it's been written in books later on, that the gallows was down Griffin Lane on the corner of Bicester Road. And this is because in the old Aylesbury book from, I think that was published first in 1976, Elliot Viney and Pamela Nightingale. He writes in there that that very piece of information about it being on Griffin Lane. So that comes from the 1885 book A History of Aylesbury by Robert Gibbs, where he gives a description of where Gallows Road and Gallows Corner was. And he says, Gallows Corner is about a quarter of a mile from the town, on the west side of the road. It was here the gallows was situated prior to the erection of the new drop in front of the County Hall. And it says the gallows is a permanent structure, stood here before the open field was enclosed. Its position affected the line of hedging and formed a corner, thus its name. The deviation of the hedgerow marks the exact spot where so many miserable creatures met with the violent deaths under the severe laws of our forefathers. Elsewhere in his book, he gives an account written by John Gibbs, who was around at the time when the gallows were at Bicester Road. And he says the gallows stood about 2 furlongs below the town's end, on the left side of the road to Bicester, and called the Gallows Road. So we know of Townsend Peace that exists today, because I used to work down there. So it must be near there, mustn't it? So I had a look in the old newspapers, and we find in 1868 that an auction took place. And it shows here that all the valuable close of land containing nearly 12 acres, known as Townsend, or Ardnam Hill Field, situated on the Bicester Road, close to the town, and forming one of the best sites to be met with for the erection of first-class villas. So if we go back to 1813 and look at the earliest map of Aylesbury and the area, we can see a large enclosure at the top of Bicester Road there, and this must be Townsend. But this is actually 16 acres, so maybe by 1868 it was much reduced, but that's roughly where Townsend was. So let's now look at the modern map, and this aerial view shows exactly where Townsend was. Quite a large piece of land, isn't it? And you can see there's Ardnam Street and West Street, Mount Pleasant, all that area. So if we now take a look at the old map again, so if you notice in the field next to Griffin Lane there where the sewage works was, there's a little kink in the hedgerow. Now you remember Robert Gibbs said it was a quarter of a mile from the town. A quarter of a mile from Townsend is exactly that spot. Although John Gibbs says it's 2 furlongs, which is about 200 metres, so that's much nearer the town. But my money is on that little kink there. So if we look at where that is today, that's just on the corner of the car park of Perry's. So this is the spot, I believe, where the gallows stood. I've always said it was Griffin Lane, and I think everyone else has as well. If you look online, you'll see it written by other sources, Bucks County Council, or Bucks Council, and Aylesbury Town Council have repeated it as well. And I'm just as guilty. I think I've probably said it on Aylesbury Remembered as well. But it pays to look back, I think, to try and work out where this information came from and try and tie it in. So, after all that, I hope that answers that question. So although I asked for questions on Aylesbury Remembered, I seem to get a lot of photo requests. So another question is from Anita Straker, who asks, do you have any photos inside Friars at the Borough Assembly Hall? Well, yes, I do. I've got quite a few of Friars. Admittedly, they're mostly Civic Centre, but I have found 1 or 2 from the Borough Assembly Hall, which I'll show you now. So here we can see the crowd assembled for Roy Buchanan's Friars gig at the Borough Assembly Hall on May the 26th, 1973. Look at that lot. Very, very 70s, aren't they? Flares and long hair. Yeah. And that's another one of the crowd assembled there. But for a view of the stage, I found one also from 1973, but this isn't a Friars gig. It's when Billy Fury came to the Borough Assembly Hall, and you can see how close the stage is to everyone. It wasn't very high up. So yeah, that's the Borough Assembly Hall, and obviously not there now. That was demolished around 1980, 81 to make way for Hale Lee's shopping centre. So you'd have a job trying to find out exactly where that stage was with the shops that are there now. Here's another question by George McGowan. Do you have anything on the Bourbon connection? So, by the Bourbon, he must be referring to Bourbon Street, which was named after the Bourbon family, the royal family of France. And we know that King Louis XVIII was exiled to England during the Napoleonic Wars, and he stayed at Hartwell House for a few years. But the question is, why was Bourbon Street named after them? Because at the time King Louis was at Hartwell House, Bourbon Street was called Waterhouse Street, and it didn't change its name until 1838, which is very strange. I mean, the Napoleonic Wars were like the 1810s, weren't they? So that's a long time, and he died long before 1838, so I'm not actually sure about this. The only thing that was happening around 1838 was Queen Victoria's coronation. But then I tried to find out, did she have any connection with the Bourbon family? Because she was Hanover, wasn't she? Saxe-Coburg and all them. So it's a bit of a mystery to me. I couldn't find any reference to why Bourbon Street was changed. It just said that it had. Very frustrating. I'd probably have to go through records or something like that. But looking online in newspapers, I couldn't find any firm evidence for why the road had changed. Right, so we'll leave it on the last question from Jack Clark. Can you show the level of detail in the photographs on your site? He means the Aylesbury Remembered website, not Facebook. Having bought a couple, I don't think people realise how good they are. Well, thanks for that, Jack. Yes, some of the photographs are very highly detailed, especially the old glass plate negatives. And here's a few now I'll show you. And we start with one from 1872, which is Market Square. This one's Market Square again, and this time it's from 1887, during an oxen roasting for Queen Victoria's Silver Jubilee. And the last one from Market Square, and this one's from 1908. Those three were from my personal collection, and now the last two are from the Bucks Herald. This one is Old Friarage Road from 1947. And the last one here is Cambridge Street from 1958. Some amazing detail there. So that's the end of this episode. So I shall leave it there, and I'll see you in the next one.